Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of Victim to Victory. I am absolutely honoured to sit with my first guest of 2026. He has been a massive inspiration to myself, and I'm sure so many survivors out there. Um, so we're here today with Jason Poole, which is Jenny Poole's brother. And I'm going to pass over to Jason. And firstly, what I would love to hear is, who was Jenny as a person, Jason?
Yeah, it's a tough question because she was mad. She loved life. She was 24. She was the mother of 2 children. She was an all-round just genuinely honest, hard-working, good person. She committed so much of even her teenage years, to volunteering in the community on summer projects and youth clubs. She played for the GA club locally, Erin's Isle, along with my sister Claire. She had went back to school after having her first child, in 6th year. Done her leaving cert, went on and done her courses. She was a carer in the community, and then was working in the local nursing home, up until she died. If we were to describe her, like, you couldn't walk through Finglas Village without everybody knowing Jennifer. She'd stop and she'd be talking to everybody. I suppose music was her life. She loved music. She had learned how to drive. She had moved out of the family home. She was living by herself for her children. And when she'd be coming to the house, like, you would normally hear her before you'd see her because you'd hear the music and the car before you'd actually get to see Jennifer in person. Even at like a party, she was just a life and soul. She was always first on the dance floor, always getting other people up, you know. She loved Christmas, she loved Easter, she loved Halloween, all those different events that you just take for granted when you have a family unit. And when somebody is taken from that family unit, those events just aren't the same anymore. And we do try honour her throughout the year in lots of different ways. Different types of events. Obviously supporting others is a big thing. But also it's that private time and those private moments with our children around Halloween and Christmas and Easter, the times that they would have memories of Jennifer, and trying to keep those memories alive, which is really important for us as a family.
Yeah, well, you should be, honestly, so she would be so proud of you because you've changed so much for so many people out there. So I suppose we'll take it firstly and start off with Jennifer's story and what happened to Jennifer. If you'd like to tell people at home how it started and how it came to you to find out, and then obviously how she was tragically murdered in the end then.
Yeah, I suppose for your listeners, it's really, really important, I suppose, to note that it isn't easy.
Yeah.
And for anyone who has been through that process will know firsthand, it isn't easy. You don't leave on the first time. You don't leave on the second time. On average, it takes 7 to 8 times for a person to leave. And when they leave, that's when they're most at risk.
Yeah.
And in Jennifer's situation, Jennifer had entered into this relationship within, I suppose, 9 to 10 months. But in the very first 2 to 3 months of that relationship, he was already living with her. Yeah. For us as a family, we didn't know what the red flags were of domestic violence or coercive control. But now looking back, like, Jennifer met every single red flag and didn't know what they were. We didn't know what they were because there was nobody talking about it.
Yeah.
You know? But moving on then, he had moved into the family home. Things just weren't right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
We had picked up on small things. Like, he'd be in the house and he'd be going from one room to another if she was in it. You know, he'd be texting her from the other side of the room, and you could see, like, he had his phone out and then her phone would go beep, and then you're just kind of, there were small things like that. I suppose gradually over the course of the couple of months then, you were starting to see less of him, but also less of Jennifer. Or if you went to Jennifer's house, he'd be in the bedroom, or, you know, when he came for dinner that Christmas, he sat at the opposite table facing the wall. Very strange. Yeah. I'd brought Jennifer to buy her car. He sat in the car journey the whole way down the back of the car for 2 hours, didn't speak a word. There was just a lot of strange behaviour. But with the strange behaviour, we just thought he was odd, you know. Really
Sorry,
did.
I don't mean to.
Yeah, no, we just were like, oh, there's, you know, maybe there's something not right there. Or, you know, he had always told Jennifer that he had come home from Spain, that he'd been on holidays there, and he had come home to Ireland. Okay. And that was the story he told her, the story she told us, and the story he told us, and some family members also. I suppose very quickly then we started to notice there was bruising and stuff like that, particularly around her eyes, but everything she had an explanation for. She had an excuse, she had a reason, she had it backed up, she had the children backed up with stories. And, you know, like if she had a black eye, she'd say, oh, I was playing football in the park with the kids, or one of them hit, or with the Avengers, Ty was another one. All of these kind of stories that you just went, they're believable, you know,
Yeah.
because she had plenty of time to think and she was plenty of time to cover up. And that's what most victims do.
Yeah.
They don't want to put the pressure on their family or their family to know anything, because we're still living in, even though we're in 2026, we're still living in somewhat of a situation where what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. And we really need to move from that. And it's very hard from a victim to move from that situation. But really, if we're going to make progress with domestic violence and the offences, like when you think of last year alone, Lauren, there was over 60,000 cases reported to the guards of domestic violence, and they're only the 60,000 people who actually went beyond the closed doors and said, I'm going to take that first step. And as you know, and everybody else knows, there's a massive road from that initial first step.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get back into your life. And this is what happened with Jennifer. She had let him out of her life on 6 or 7 different occasions. We didn't know about them all. We knew about the one previous to the last one. But there was times where she'd pack him stuff and ask him to leave. I suppose the Christmas then, it was quite obvious, you know, for Jennifer, the Christmas leading up to her death, she did, and it was COVID and there was lots going on. But the sitting at the table with the, you know, the face facing the wall and not sitting at the same table as everybody else, that was like an alarm bell for us. But there was also other things like, you know, Jennifer loved Christmas, and we done the pantomime that year, particularly was online, and we all came to my house and we were, you know, everyone was there. But Jennifer just sent her kids.
Okay.
And she said, oh, the kids will go, I'm going to stay with Gavin.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, that's very strange. So he had started then that process of, oh, nobody likes me, the family don't like me, I'm not going anywhere that I'm not liked. But all it was doing was actually really taking her and removing her from her family.
Isolation.
You know, the isolation piece.
Yeah.
He had taken her car, the initial car, and smashed it, drove it through a wall. We just heard that the car was after being crashed. She crashed the car. No, not so. That story was so far from the truth. But all of this stuff only came out after Jennifer died.
Yeah.
You know, so you were hearing all these stories, or there was incidents that you weren't aware of. And a lot of them came from the kids themselves, because they were interviewed by the specialist guards for a couple of months following Jennifer's death, and a lots of stuff come out, you know, the mobile phone being smashed so often. If she went and she loved the Yankee candles. If she went and bought a Yankee candle, he'd take it off the window and throw it onto the ground underneath the balcony. Just stuff that was done on devilment. He done some things that I suppose you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
To any human being.
Yeah.
I remember one occasion Jennifer came and she had like cuts on her leg, and she had said that she had picked up a work bag belonged to Gavin, and there was a Stanley blade sticking out of it and then a cutter. Gavin worked for about 2 days in the whole time that they were together on a building site. I'm not sure why he would need a Stanley blade, but again, it was a story that was made up that we just believed, because it was like, oh, he's after getting a bit of work. Jennifer's taking the work bag out of the car. Can happen.
Yeah.
But it was only really when Jennifer died and we went into the house and we you know, the kids had said about all of the knives that were hid around the house, and you could even see on the mattress on her bed all the stab marks where she'd be lying in bed at night not knowing if she was going to wake up the next morning or not. So there was lots of stuff that we didn't find out till the very end. That's one of the main reasons why we when we were allowed to be vocal after the trial was finished, that it was important to get Jennifer's story out there, because there was lots of women and men living with this situation that people just are not aware of, because the only place that Jennifer was actually able to go was work, because he relied on her money. You know, we know on a Thursday when it would be payday, she'd have to leave. My mum used to mind the kids. She'd pick them up from school. Jennifer would have to go home, pick Gavin up, go and collect her money in the post office, and then go and pick up the kids. Even though it would have been just so straightforward, the kids were 2 minutes away from her from work, but she had to go and collect the money. And the guards even did some investigation into that, and they could see from the CCTV footage that on a Thursday he would be with her. He wouldn't be with her any other day. But on a Thursday when it came to payday, and the kids kind of backed that story up. When we got Jennifer's car back, the first thing the kids did was run, because they knew where the money was hid. because she'd hide money. And the kid said to us, oh, my mum used to hide money there so she could get us some nice things. So he obviously used to take her money, you know. So all of those kind of things, yes, there was a lot of coercive control, but in Jennifer's case, there was a lot of violence. There was violence there through the whole process. And he did on many occasions, I suppose, do damage to Jennifer. Like when you look at Jennifer's post-mortem report, you know, there was 17 to 18 stab wounds that were consistent with that day, but she had 129 old injuries that were not consistent with the day of her death. So you can imagine, you know, that whole process of there was bite marks, there was all that kind of stuff. And Jennifer had let him out of her life. He was gone about 6 days before he came back that day. So there was lots of situations, there was lots of times that just things didn't sit right with us, but you didn't know what was going on. For me, if I've been brutally honest, I didn't like him. And I didn't like him from the very first day I met him.
That good feeling.
You have that good feeling that there's something just not right about this fella. You know, he walked in with the fake, you know, designer gear, the swagger, the watch that was looking like it was going to weigh him down that potentially was fake because the fella never worked a day in his life, you know. But he had all this persona, and lots of them do, but lots of them don't. You know, you have, I suppose, perpetrators who get up and they go into work and they look like they're normal Joe Soaps. And they come home and they do it. And then you have the other ones, the Gavin style, is what I like to call them, that they don't care. And we didn't know Gavin's background. But when Jennifer died, you know, there was 4 or 5 ex-partners who come out and spoke about the effects of their relationship with him, the stalking, the following them to work. You know, we know now that he was in prison for a domestic violence offence.
He was
previously. And when he was told us he was in Spain, he was actually in Mountjoy prison because he had been arrested and charged with a domestic violence offence against his ex-partner and her mother. Wow. And he had locked him in a room. There was incidents with a weapon, a knife, and he had done time in prison. And he was let out on early release for good behaviour, whatever you want to call it. But if he had done the time he was given, him and Jennifer would have never met. And that was the biggest thing for me when we were sitting in court going through a murder trial, and then his previous convictions are read out. And that was the first time we heard that Gavin had done time in prison. So for all of that time, we thought he'd been in Spain, he was living over there, he came home, he was back and forward with a relative that lived close by to Jennifer, and that's initially how they met. But that wasn't the story at all. The story was he had actually come out of prison for a domestic violence offence. So I suppose we had a lot of stuff to get our head around. You had lost Jennifer. You had all of this stuff that had come out that was going on in the background in the past. You also had the traumatised children, the case of, you know, holding on to them. You also had then all of this stuff that was coming out in court, that of these 12, 13 previous convictions that he had, and nobody in our family knew about them. Jennifer didn't know about them. His family did. Jennifer was around them long enough to know that if your son or your brother or your sister or your nephew or your cousin was doing something like that and you're now in a relationship, I don't know how anybody wouldn't want to say, look, this is what he has done in the past. Just be mindful. No one's asked anybody to get involved. But when you ask as a family, what is he like? And you're told he's one of the good ones. He's one of the good ones.
That's what they found.
That's what we were told. He's one of the good ones. Wow. So imagine he had done this to 5 different women, had done time in prison, and then ended a life. And this person is going to be out on the streets again. Like, let's call a spade a spade. Life is not life in Ireland. No. You know? And no matter what, the average life sentence is 22 years. Jennifer's 5 years dead this April. He's been in prison from the day, and that will start from the day of his sentence. So he's done 5 years out of a potential 22. Now, he could get out earlier on early release because obviously, you know, the way the system works and the good behaviour. But even in prison, Lauren, you know, when you go through a murder trial, you are given, a family liaison officer from the guards. And they work very closely with you every day, every week, from the time Jennifer died, that those people were standing in our living room. Until the very end, until the day we walked out of court for the very last time. But when that process finished, for people who don't know, then you're given a family liaison person from the court services. So every time like a prisoner is moved or they have to go to the hospital, you have to be notified. But like for the first 2 years, we were getting notified quite regularly because he was moving from prison to prison from prison. And on one occasion, we were told he was being moved from a prison for the smooth running of the prison. So even in prison, he couldn't manage himself. He was attacking prisoners, he was attacking staff, he was trashing his cells. He was doing what he wanted to do. And he still is. You know, he's moved in the last 5-6 months, he's moved 3 times.
Wow.
So even behind closed doors and behind bars, he's still not able to manage himself. But again, this person's going to be out in the streets. So we kind of, as a family, when we went through the process and we were seeing all of these red flags and all these issues, and how many times Jennifer was let down by the system, and how many times victims in the past, like if you look at the majority of women who have been murdered in Ireland, a lot of them are by their partners or ex-partners. And if you were to go a little bit deeper into that background, a lot of them had previous for domestic violence before they met those people. So this is a pattern. This is not, you know, I did it once and I got over it. So as a family, we had a lot to think about. We had a lot to take in. And we kind of sat down and looked at the majority of the failures that was made in Jennifer's case. And also, what could Jennifer have done? Could she have went to the courts? No. Why? Because you have to sit in front of a judge, probably for 5 or 6 or 7 hours, and then be told, yeah, where's your evidence? Or, you know, come back tomorrow. Victims don't have 6 or 7 hours because they're being coercively controlled. This person needs to know where they are every minute of the day. They can't say, oh, I'm in court getting a bar order against you, you know, because their life is going to be even further at
And
risk.
evidently they don't listen to the courts.
No, they don't.
As you said, he's in prison and he's not even taken to it.
And the majority of them who break their bar orders and their safety orders and their protection orders. And, you know, again, it's a piece of legislation that needs to be looked at. But there was lots and lots of different things. And since Jennifer died, the majority of cases and women, I get inundated on a daily basis. Sometimes you have to take that day off and you kind of go, I can't look at it today, or I can't answer an email today, or I can't answer a text. But they're all the same story. You could put Jennifer's head onto any one of those bodies and it's the same story. We have done 4 documentaries with 4 like Virgin Media, TG Catter. We did crime investigation. But there was the last one that we did, there was 8 stories in it on crime investigation. I think it was My Lover, My Killer, I think it was the programme. But I looked at Jennifer's story because I was obviously I wanted to see how I looked on camera. But looking at Jennifer's story, and I looked at it as a single episode.
Yes.
Obviously I had seen all the cuts and the edits and all that kind of stuff. But you know when you're seeing something on Netflix and you want to see it in its final piece. And then I sat one night and I watched all 8 episodes together. And I mean, you could have put Jennifer's story into any of the other 7 episodes. This is a pattern. Yeah. They have a pattern. They know what they're doing. They go out of their way to make sure they make the woman's life hell. And that as simple as, they don't sit and think, oh, I'm going to hit you today because my brain just told me to. They know exactly what they're doing. And what's even worse is when they come back the next day with the flowers or the perfume, and the woman thinks, oh, it was okay to happen. I'm just thinking of one story that in a couple of weeks ago was where I came across a domestic violence case. Yeah. As it was happening. And I put the woman into the car and I brought her to a safe place.
You saw her happening?
I saw her happen.
Wow.
And I brought her, I walked by, parked the car up, I walked by, I said to her, can you go to X, Y or Z there? And she left the situation with the 2 children and I met her about 5 minutes away. She knew exactly where to meet me. And I put her into the car and I said to her, what just happened there shouldn't happen. I said, he's having a few drinks. He's never done this before. And I just thought, I turned around in the car seat and I said, if you're telling me that this hasn't happened before, you're only kidding yourself. And I explained who I was and she actually knew Jennifer's story. And I brought her to a safe place. But in that 45, 50 minutes that process was going on, I had been reported to the guards, but they hadn't showed up. Because they're busy and I get that. But when you're sitting in your front garden and someone is bouncing a bike off your head and your 2 children are watching, you need somebody immediately. Yeah. Because these are the women and men in some cases whose lives are being put at risk. So a lot of times when we're looking at this, you know, we were writing all this down and building this up, that we were going to go and change the world, and you can change the world, and that's just reality. And since Jennifer's death, lots of other women have died at the hands of violence against men, and unfortunately some children too. And we're not going to have all of these great laws and protect everyone, because it's still going to happen. But what we wanted to do was that people would be aware. What could you do to make them aware that this person has done this before? Now, I went in initially to the department, and, you know, I had 15, 16 pages of a document.
Yeah. We're
you know,
talking about
and
Jennies Law.
Jennies
here,
Law.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even Jennies Law at the time. It was just, I was so angry
Yeah.
with the system that I needed to tell them where they had failed.
Of course.
She had been let down by Tulsa. She had been let down by the prison service. She had been let down by the guards. She had been let down by everyone, because lots of people knew the story, bar the one that needed to know it.
Yeah.
And that was her.
Yeah.
But going back to, I suppose, you asked like the leading up to the day. So that kind of was the massive lead up to the day. She had ended the relationship for the last time.
And was she still living in her home, or
she was still living in the house?
Okay.
And she had removed him from the home. And I'd say within 3 to 4 days, everything was cleared out. And we knew that because when we went in to the house afterwards, there was nothing. There wasn't even a toothbrush belonged to him. So she literally, when she did it that time,
really
she had
tried.
meant it.
Yeah.
You know. And what was really, really important is that during the process of that relationship, he had removed her from all of her friends.
Yeah.
They were still there. They were still there in the background, 100% they were, but she wasn't allowed to communicate with them. No. He had removed them from her social media. She wasn't allowed to be with her friends. And what was really, really evident was the night before she died, she was out with her friends. And that was so telling. Yeah. That she'd ended the relationship, and the first people she turned back to was her family and her friends. Yeah. You know, in relation to, I suppose, they weren't going anywhere. They were going out to buy milkshakes and drive around, listen to music in the car. Chats. You know, and go back to, and it was for me, I always remember Jennifer started I wouldn't say she started not looking after herself. That's probably the wrong way to say it. But, you know, I'd often say to her, Jennifer, did you not brush your hair this morning? Like, you're going to work.
Yeah. It's like a mental prison
like
she would have been in, yeah.
If she couldn't dress, she couldn't put makeup on, she wouldn't have been allowed. She wouldn't have been allowed to do it. But at that time, we didn't know what that meant. Of course. So we're just like, oh my God, what is the story with her? You know? Yeah. And really, the day before Jennifer died, she walked into the house and she looked like the old Jennifer again. She was dressed properly. She had her hair done. She had her makeup on. She was only going to buy a milkshake with her mates. But it was her coming back to herself. Yeah. And that night, he had decided then that she must have put something up on social media, and he knew she was out with her friends. And he was on her phone. Where are you? What you doing? I need a drink. So eventually she gave in. She went over to Ballymun, where he was living in his uncle's house, and she gave him the drink. And from what we know from the statements from the friends was that she handed him the drink and he let the drink fall and said, no, you can go and get me another one. What? And that again was, he'd lost control. Yeah, he was trying to get back. And now he's regaining control. Mm-hmm. And if I don't know whether you've heard of Professor Jane Smith. No. She's in the UK. She was in the police force in the UK. I've done a bit of work with her in relation to, she looks at the 8 stages of domestic violence. Right. And stage 7, stage 8 is near. Will
you talk us through them 7?
Yeah. So basically, the first stage is really is nothing to do with the victim. It's really the person themselves and their background and what their I suppose upbringing and their past. And if you look at Gavin's, it's very straightforward. He'd already done time in prison. Yes. So then the stage 2 and 3 is really the early stages. It's that, you know, getting in and the moving into the house and that taking ownership. And then stage 4 and 5 is a little bit of more deeper. There's a lot more in it. They're removing the family and the friends. Like even in Jennifer's case, the key was taken off. The house key for our family home was taken off her car keys. It went missing. No, he had taken it off so that she didn't have free reign of walking into her family home. Yeah. All of those things are happening in stage 4 and 5 then. And that's when they really try leave. And then stage 6 is when they're most at risk. Okay. I suppose because they've maybe broken that cycle or trying to break that cycle. And stage 7 is what is really, it's the end of it. It's that one last time, that trying to come back. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in Jennifer's story, because when that second orange, or that orange fell, she didn't get him the second one. She left.
Yes.
And she went back off with her friends. And during that night, he added those friends on Instagram and social media, because he needed to know where Jennifer was. He was after losing control, and he needed to gain that control again. And he wasn't. And that was really it. So there was text messages on Jennifer's phone then, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to do all these things. The pattern.
Yes.
And then going back to stage 6
manipulation
of that, it's, if you're not going to love me anymore, there's no point me being here anymore. And they use that process of getting you back in, because you're going to feel sorry for them. And most women out there
wants
are
to carry
going
that.
to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Because they also feel, I can fix him.
Yeah.
And Jennifer
I can help
thought
them.
she could fix him. I
You
could
think
help
you can
him.
love it out of them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And that was really the telltale. There was those things on her phone. On top of that, just on her phone, Jennifer had, and I know I've listened to women all the time, the doorbell cameras, everything is, I've even heard where, iPods have been put in the boot of the car so that they can be tracked when she's driving. There's all of these mad stories,
Yeah.
and I'm calling them
I've
mad
heard
stories because
crazy
they're absolutely mad.
Yeah.
How anybody can even come up and think of those and think that that's normal and acceptable to do that to a woman.
Yeah.
I do not understand it. But he did those kind of mad things, and the voice notes and the stuff that Jennifer kept on her phone. She had a folder set up, and it was called For My Eyes Only, but it was connected to her email address. So clearly he didn't know her email.
Yeah.
So she was at the store, and lots of images and screenshots of different things.
So she was getting ready.
So
to
she
do
had
something.
built up a profile for the guards. When Jennifer died, I tried to get in and, close her bank account and close all the, when you're sitting and you don't know when you're going to get your sister's body back, and you feel like, oh God, I need to be doing stuff. Yeah. We've the funeral, we can't even organise because we don't know when we're going to release our body. We don't. So you were kind of doing the smaller things of sorting out that kind of our clothes and we were very quickly, we had to give the apartment back because the landlord wanted the apartment, and that was it. So we got 5 hours to clean out the apartment before we had to hand them back the keys. And so we were kind of doing all those kind of things. And in that process, I suppose we were thinking of, well, where do you put all this, or what's all this about? And yeah, you had time to think. And when you're thinking about closing things down and you're doing all that, you have to use your bank account, or you have to use your email address. I went into the email address, and she, for whatever reason, I remember I helped her set it up, and she had me as a backup email address. So if she lost her password, I could then reset it. So I went in, hacked into her email account, reset the password, and when I went in, I found this folder. So I was able to inform the guards of this. The guards weren't able. The guards said to me, "Can you come up and show us how you did that?" I was like, okay. I was a backup email, so I was able to go in and change it. So there was so much evidence on her phone and within this folder of previous times. So it really, the narrative that he was coming at of Jennifer come after me with a knife, which he used right up to the last day in court, was always able to be banished and say, no, that wasn't the case, because they had massive amount of evidence that was built up from previous situations. So on the morning of Jennifer's death then, he that one last time kicked in again, and the uncle's house, the shower wasn't working, there was no hot water, and he asked Jennifer, could he come over and have a shower? Jennifer, being that caring person that she was, yeah, come over, have your shower, whatever, and leave. Jennifer allowed him into the apartment, and then she left. She didn't stay in the apartment when he was there, and she left. She went to the Eurospar around the corner, from the house. How do we know? Because when we got our car back a year and a half later, the shopping was still in the boot of the car. She had never even got to bring the shopping back into the apartment. So she had contacted a neighbour who was a relative, and asked, was he still there? And she said, there's no noise, there's no nothing. Jennifer went back to the apartment, because in the process of that, the 17th of April 2021, for people who remember, it was an absolute scorcher of a day. Everyone was going to the beach, everyone was going, out for the day, and as a family, that's what the plan was. So one of the children was with Jennifer, one of our children was with my mum, and she was going back to the house to pick up clothes so that they could all go to the beach together. And she went into the house. She left the little lad outside, parked outside the house. It's an apartment kind of duplexes. So she parked right outside where it says "Please do not park." That's exactly where she parked. And she had no intentions of obviously
Of
being any
staying
more
there.
than 10 seconds running in, getting something going. And she never made it beyond the hall door. He was waiting for her. He had obviously planned the whole day out. He was going to go in, have a shower, and wait for her when she returned. And that never getting out from behind the hall door. Yes, her little lad heard the whole thing happening. He was able to give evidence to the guards of what Mammy said before she died and who she was screaming for, and please don't do this, please don't do this. He's seen Gavin leaving the apartment with no top on. We know now that he had cleaned some of the knives, and clearly hadn't put clothes on so that he wouldn't have any blood splatter on his clothes. So there was lots of planning involved in this.
Yeah.
This wasn't just, an act of revenge or an act of, we come in and we have an argument. What was really, really, I wouldn't even say hurtful, was that when we eventually did get into the apartment after the guards allowed us in for a few hours, we still found knives that the guards hadn't even found. Like we pulled behind the drawers in our bedroom, the chest of drawers, like at the side of the bedside lockers, as they're called. There was a knife hidden behind there. There was a knife in the dog's bed, underneath the dog's bed. Like he had literally got them living in terror. She lived in terror of this the whole time. And of course, she's going to put this front on because he was telling her, if your family get involved, I'm going to kill you and your kids.
Yeah.
And what there's two real things for me, that for me, when we got to go into the house, after Jennifer, it was a couple of days afterwards when the forensics team had done what they needed to do. All of the pictures on the walls of her and her kids were all slashed. So clearly he had done all that while he was waiting on them to come back. And the second biggest thing was, and it was the one that probably sticks out with me the most, two major things: having to go to the hospital after the ambulance, not knowing what was going on because I was just told go to the hospital, going to the hospital and actually having to identify her, sitting there thinking you're
You did
going
that?
into the hospital. Like when I got there, I seen the fire brigade and ambulance, and I just thought, oh great, it's Connolly Hospital, so there's always something going on here. Walked in, and do you know when you get out of the car and there's two guards and they're staring at you, and they know you because from the community work that we would have done in the summer projects and whatever, and they just said you go in and you register in next door. So I went in and I said, oh, my sister was taken in by ambulance. And you just now when you're looking back, like that odd look that you were getting, and you're like, oh, somebody with you now. I was brought into a room, nobody else had arrived yet, brought into a room, doctor come in and just said, oh, your sister's dead. And I was like, sorry? You mixing her up with somebody else? Like, she just come in an ambulance. She was dead leaving the house. They did try work on her, and that's why she was brought to the hospital. But having to go in and identify her,
And see.
seeing her lying there, all of her wounds visible, but yet you're told you can't touch her because she's evidence. So while she was not, I wouldn't say still warm, but while she was still Jennifer,
Yeah.
she wasn't being rolled out of a fridge and put into a coffin.
She was your sister.
She was my sister, and that I couldn't do.
Yeah.
That was the one of the two. And the second was going back to the house. That was a Saturday. And on the Sunday, they had came on the Saturday evening and asked, the kids knew our password for our phone. And they came and asked the kids what was the 4 digits anyway of the PIN code. And on the Sunday, the family liaison officer came and he said, from the evidence on the phone, he said, no, I know you don't want to hear this. He said, but from the evidence on your phone, on the phone, he said, you're lucky in some ways that you're only burying your daughter and you don't have 3 coffins coming to your living room. So the evidence on the phone of what he had said that he would do, he would have killed the 2 children as well. So in some ways you have to kind of, and I don't mean this to sound like, oh, sure, it's only your sister. But in some ways you have to think, we lost Jennifer. But if the 2 children had been there, they would have also had the same outcome,
Yeah.
because he had a massive hatred because
weren't his
for
kids.
his, yet they weren't his
They
children.
weren't his children.
So he had a massive hatred clearly for that.
Yeah.
Um,
The jealousy of the love she would have had
yeah,
for her kids. Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
and was quite vocal about it in messages. And that was they're the two biggest things, like having to identify her, but also in your head going, I could have having to identify 3 bodies.
Yeah.
And that to be backed up by the guards to tell you, you know, in some ways, we're not saying you're lucky,
Yeah.
but you are lucky that you only have 1 coffin coming to your living room and not 3. That was the devilment and the deviance and the evilness that this person had shown, and it's not uncommon, and we know that we are seeing it in the media all the time. You know, it's not uncommon, and I suppose from that then, you know, everything was kind of just a roller coaster for days and days and days. Like it took, I think it was nearly 2 weeks before Jennifer's funeral, with the, you know, releasing of the body and all that kind of stuff, and post-mortems. And when it's a murder investigation, I suppose it has to carry
They go
the
through
way
steps, like, yeah.
that it has to be done. And then we had lots of court appearances and that kind of stuff. But do you know, when like you have that 24-hour window of when someone is arrested before they're charged, and you're sitting, and it was midnight. I think they had up to midnight on Sunday night, on the Sunday night, to either release him or charge him. And like the house was absolutely jammers, of people coming to show respects, and your family are there, and everyone's trying to, you know, it's less than 24 hours. At this point, we didn't even know where Jennifer was. You know, we knew we had identified her in the hospital, but we clearly knew the hospital wasn't where she was going to stay. I do remember given a flyer and a little piece of paper with a number and told, ring there, they'll tell you where she is. I thought,
even
great, thanks very
that,
much.
though,
They weren't very compassionate, let's
Yeah,
just say.
where's the empathy, like?
There was no empathy
Yeah.
at all from anybody in there, bar the guards, in fairness. You know, I remember the guard who brought me into the room, and he said, look, I was with her the whole way. He said, in the ambulance. He said she wasn't on her own. And I always remember, and this is something I still don't get my head around. You know, that guard had to deal with that and see that, and then he was just put back on her house that afternoon, with a bit of tape around the house, and told stand there. And I remember, like, this is this is where your head doesn't even be thinking. Like, we went to the shop and we got a load of food and made sandwiches and brought them up to the guards that night that were sitting outside our house. And when we went up, we were like, oh, can we get the kid's iPad out of the car? Like, and they didn't even know the car was Jennifer's. You know, everything happened so quickly. And my mum and sister did get to the scene before Jennifer was taken out.
Were they called?
They were going up because Jennifer was taking so long with the clothes.
They were panicking.
That they went up, and they seen a load of fire brigades and ambulance or whatever. And my sister, being my sister, she went back to Jennifer's house, and when she got there, she just says there was just police, fire brigades, ambulances everywhere. She said they wouldn't let her in for obvious reasons, but she just thought, because of COVID, they're not letting us in because they're working in there and they have to wear masks, whatever. Not knowing what the true story was. My
It's
mum,
the last thing that you would probably think as a family. Do you know what I
they seen
mean?
her being brought out and put into the ambulance, and you know, they didn't know any different. They all just went to the hospital and was given the same news as I had got. But I suppose the courts process then, you know, took its toll on us all as a family. I think you were listening to stuff that you didn't necessarily want to have to listen to. You know, you're listening to post-mortem reports, how each knife wound, you know, in centimetres, and how much depth it went in. Like, stuff that you really, really do not want to have to listen to. But that's the process, and you have to go through it. And while in the background of all that, we're thinking of, well, how can we stop this happening again? How can we stop women and men not having to go through this again? Because it was horrific, and it is horrific. And people say, you know, as it gets longer, it gets easier. It's absolutely such a myth. The longer it goes, the harder it becomes, because the longer you are from seeing those people that you love, and that's something that you have to, I suppose, adjust to. You learn how to live with it, I think. You know, some people say to me, oh, how do you get up every day? I don't know how I get up every day. Like, today is Saturday and I'm sitting here with you. What made me get up today? Because I know that someone is going to listen to this story and they're going to move. They're going to take that next step. because they don't want to be another statistic. And I don't ever want Jennifer or any woman out there to be a statistic. And that's what was really important. So we sat down and we kind of looked at the failures of the system, of how Jennifer wasn't protected, but then there wasn't that there to protect her. And we really, really put a lot of energy and effort into it. And we met with our local TD, and he kind of organised just a meeting for me to go into the Dáil and sit down. And it was open to anybody who wanted to come in from whatever political party you want. I was walking into a room expecting there to be 2 or 3 people, and I'd be just telling Jennifer's story and the failures. Obviously, not giving it as the detail I'm giving it to you, but I mean, I was coming from it like the failures, and I'm going into a government building and I'm going to tell them what. I walked into a room and it was jammers from wall to wall. And what was really, really so evident at that point was that the majority of the people in the room were men. And I just thought, men are the perpetrators in over 90% of these cases. Yeah. This room is full of men. I need to convince them that they may not be culprits or may not be perpetrators, but I need to convince them that men are, and that we need to change the law or make a law or create something that's going to protect women. Yeah. When the majority of the men were men and very few of them were women. And I know that's just politics in itself and people weren't available. I'm sure other people would have loved to be there and all that, but I'm just talking about when I went in.
And you were talking about your feelings.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my God, how am I even going to say this? Yeah. You know, like when I was expecting more women, because it's women who are victims in most of the cases. And I was like, oh God. So look, it went from there to, you know, we're nearly 4 years into this, to the saga of trying to change a law. We're on our 4th minister, really. You know, we had Helen McEntee, then we went to Simon Harris when she was out, then back to Helen, and now with Jim O'Callaghan, and we've been through 2 governments, and we're still fighting. But what we have come to now is that we have got an increase in knife crime, under Helen McEntee, and it was something that we really pushed for. The sentence on knife crime was increased, and fairness to Helen, in her time in government, in the 27 different pieces of change that we asked for, she did implement some of them, and some of them come under our national strategies. But what I would always say is the national strategy is on a shelf, and it's, you know, it's great that it's a strategy that's there, but how is that impacting the people on the ground? And that's why Jennies Law will, because Jennies Law is not a book gathering dust on a filing cabinet in someone's office. It'll be a real life register. And really what will happen is with Jennies Law, it will be a domestic violence register. So it'll cover domestic violence and coercive control and lots of other things. So there's going to be 9 different elements. So assault causing harm, all of those other smaller, I don't mean smaller offences, but offences that are coming that can lead up to domestic violence. Like, you know, this once off, you know, I hit her and I didn't mean it kind of story. And the guards decide to take a case. Well, at least if there's an assault charge there, and it's deemed to be, you know, go to court or be prosecuted, that they will also appear in the register. And the register will be a public available register. It will be for men and women. And what will happen is that will be up to the judge on the day in court whether he or she feels fit for this person to go onto the register. So it isn't an automatic situation where you just appear, because there's going to be situations where, you know, that it might be of a batter, not a batter, but it might impact the victim worse. If they don't want their identity known, all that kind of stuff. So the victim will be paramount to the and rightly so, to the decision that the judge makes. But the register will be on the courts.ie's website. It'll be a drop-down menu. You'll put in the person's name and their court date, their conviction, and the court orders will all come up there. And the reason why it has to be like this in relation to the judge making the decision, because if you put something on a public database like the courts.ie, it's going to give the full picture of the court case, which will include the perpetrator and the victim's name. Has to be there if it's going to be publicly available. So it will allow the victim if they don't feel that the person needs to be on a register, or it was just that once-off assault and the guards took a case. But also it's there because sometimes what we are seeing in the court systems now is that people are not getting the sentences. They're being given suspended sentences or whatever it may be, but they're not doing any time in prison. This will give the judge another tool that he can put the person on the register for a minimum of 3 years. They might not go to prison, but at least they're on the register. But what it will also do, and this isn't going to be the solution. It by no means is Jenny's Law going to be the solution, but it's going to be another tool for victims. It's going to be another tool for organisations like your Women's Aid and your Offaly Domestic Violence and Longford's Women's Link and all of those, services that are out there who are dealing firsthand every day, that they'll know that if the victim can't go onto a register and check, that they can go to their service and they'll have the tool to go and say, look, the person you're living with has that. And the reason why I think that's important is that a lot of times the victim won't go to a guard station. But if you can link in with a local domestic violence service, they can do it for you. And they can give you that. And while you're in that same room with them, they can put that plan in place. They can start going through the safety plan. They can start going through your exit strategies, because by no means is it easy. By no means is the woman or the man who was the victim of this at fault. But what's really, really crucial is that they have a proper safety plan, because when you leave, that's when you're most at risk. Jennifer left after her 7th or 8th time. That's when she was most at risk. That going back to that stage 6 and 7 of you leave the perpetrator, you try and move on with your life. There's that one last time. Think of all of the cases that we've seen in, and not in Ireland, but even around the world. There's been some really big high profile cases, where there's that one last time. Oh, they go for the walk where they got engaged and all of a sudden she falls off the cliff. Like all of those massive big, there's that one last time in lots of cases. Some of the cases even here in Ireland, I'm not going to even get into naming some of them, but they've come back that one last time. And that's when they're most at risk, and that's when it's that loss of control that you talked about, Lauren, at the very beginning. It's that element of, well, if nobody else can have, nobody's going to have you if I can't have you. So if you're not going to be in my rules, or you're not going to follow my rules, then you won't be following any rules. And that's in lots of cases. It isn't uncommon. It wasn't uncommon in Jennifer's case at all, because he set out to do what he was going to do that day. And even in court, at the very last, very last day, in his little few words that he made, that he got his legal team to read out, that he loved Jennifer. They were trying for a baby, and it was he had no intentions of killing her. She came after him with a knife, and it was just, he doesn't really remember. Number one, he never loved her. Number two, Jennifer, from the post-mortem report, Jennifer had the bar in her arm. She could have never got pregnant for him. And clearly that was a precaution she took, because she didn't want to do that. And number three, she never made it beyond the hall door. She was far, far away from her kitchen to go and grab a knife. She never made it beyond the front door. The door closed. He locked the door behind her, and he murdered her behind the hall door. She was found beyond the hall door. So even in his closing remarks, he had no sympathy. He wanted no accountability. It was everybody else's fault but his. Everybody else's. All he was doing was own up because he was caught. And that is the problem. Sometimes they're not caught. And it takes a long time. Look at cases that have been in the media, they've been buried in their own houses for 6 or 7 years. Or the perpetrators going out on the search looking for them, or asking, please, whoever did this to my wife,
I seen that
can
one
you please
in America
come,
before.
please, like it. But even some of the cases here, like there's ones that's been here, like and you, like not even too far from where we are now, and you were sitting on television asking for, whoever this was to please come forward when it's you. So a lot of times they have a story, a lot of times they have a plan, but it's really, really important for victims out there that they also have a plan. And it's a safety plan, and it's not done off the cuff, that they really think of it. And don't be afraid to reach out to family and friends, because you may have turned your back on some of them because you've had to, But people know more about domestic violence now, and they know more about the red flags, and they know that perpetrators will remove family and friends from the victim because they're the ones who love them the most. But what's really, really important as well also is that even in Jennifer's work, the amount of those people who were able to give statements and evidence to the guards of bruises and wounds that they had seen. Arnica was Jennifer's life. She must have bought bottles of it, you know. Even now, you see when the kids go in, they see a bottle of arnica and they say, "Oh, that's my ma used to wear," because she wore it like it was makeup, because she had that many bruises or wounds. But the people in work picked up on that.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they'll remove them from their family and friends. And what I'm saying here is, if you're in a work situation and you feel that there's somebody coming into work and that you're concerned, reach out. Because work is probably the only place that they won't be removed from. Because a lot of time within the coercive controls are just a financial abuse. They're taking their money, they're limiting the amount of money that they can have. So they still need them to go to work, you know. So a lot of times there's the place where you might see it, and it was the place that probably was seen the most by Jennifer's. In Jennifer's case was the people in work, and they were able to give evidence of that. But also Jennifer loved her job so much that it was very, very near the end where she'd be ringing in sick, you know. And it wasn't that she was ringing in sick. She'd be ringing in sick and then she'd say, "Oh, I have to mind the kids," because it was the kids that was sick. But actually what it turns out is that she have probably a black eye. She couldn't go, the arnica wasn't working. It was still seen, so she couldn't go to work. So she tell work that she was sick. She tell us the kids were sick so that she wouldn't have to drop the kids early in the morning before she went to work, because that was her routine. She dropped them to the house, then she'd go to work, and then the kids would be brought to work by my mum. So she couldn't come down because everyone would see it. So she had victims out there. I don't know how the pressure that they must be going through. Sometimes their head must be ready to explode because they have to constantly be thinking 5 steps ahead so that nobody can pick up on what's going on. And then they also need to be 5 steps ahead of the perpetrator to make sure what he's requested is done. Like I'd love to put my head into theirs for 5 minutes and actually see what it's like. I don't think I'd want to do it. I don't think anybody would. So when you hear of a situation where it's a family or a friend that might be in a domestic violence relationship, don't just assume, "Oh sure, why don't you just leave?
I don't know how many times.
Why don't you just get out? Why what you staying with them for?"
Yeah.
And like, I wish it was just as easy as that. I really, really wish that people would maybe just do a little bit of research as to the dangers, the safety plans that need to be there, the I suppose the evidence that's come out around domestic violence. Have a look at it, see what it's saying, and see how you can support them. It isn't about judgment, and I think that's the biggest thing for victims. It's how they're going to be judged. What will people think about me? People say it was my fault. All this extra stuff that's going on in their heads, and they don't need to. They just need to ensure that they're safe, they're minding themselves. If there's children involved, keep their children safe as much as they can. Be reporting it, be making sure you have a trail of evidence if you can. So that, unfortunately, we you're innocent in this country till proven guilty. So you need to have your evidence, and it's very hard. And that's why I think it's important that you link in with a service, because they will guide you through that process. And we're even seeing, well, I'm seeing a lot lately, from people who are contacting me, even like where there is sometimes kids involved, where there's no kids involved, but there might be a pet, and they're talking about hurting the pet, or if you go, I'm gonna kill the dog, or you'll come home, that dog will be hanging out of the wardrobe, gutted, and you're these horrific stories, knowing that the victim loves this, so they're trying to get at them the whole time, and they're living in fear, and there's no real need to live in fear, because there is support out there, and it's important that we don't have many more cases like Jennifer's. I don't think Jenny's Law will be a solution to ending domestic violence by any means at all, and anybody who thinks that is going to happen, it's not. But what it is going to give another tool, and it will be a tool like Jennifer would have had when Jennifer was going out with Gavin at the very, very beginning. She would have known, because she would have known to check the register and see that he had a history of domestic violence and had a prosecution for it. At the moment in this country, we have nothing to protect women in that regard. We don't know about the past. All we are relying on currently is that there's some journalist in a courtroom that writes a story that day. And unfortunately, they're not in those cases, because a lot of them or in their bigger ones to fry, and there's the murder ones, and there's all these extra bigger cases that so they're not hearing about these stories. So at the moment that we are relying on a newspaper or a journalist to be in court to keep women or men safe in the future is just not good enough in 2026. There's countries that have law, like in the UK, there's Clare's Law. Is it good? I think it is. Yeah. Is it protecting women? Yes. Is it failing women? Yes. Yeah. Because in this situation in the UK, you have to apply for that information.
Now, I do know from speaking to someone, it is quite quick.
Yeah.
That it comes back in.
But sometimes they're being, if the let's say for an example, you know, it's me and you, and you're in a relationship with me, and you go in to check out something, and I had a pass, but it was like 10 years ago. Yeah. They might not necessarily give you that information because it's so long in the past. Yeah. Where with Jennies Law, it'll always be there. There will always be a paper trail from the court records of what this person done. Where in some cases, I've seen cases in Clare's Law where women have talked to me and said it was amazing. Yeah. It saved me life. Yeah. And then I've other women come and saying, I didn't get the information. I'm lucky to be alive because he didn't actually kill me. But I did apply to Clare's Law, and I was told that they're not always granted.
Like, are they saying like the story's not, like who's to say the story's not good enough?
Yeah, it's somebody sitting at a desk who's given that information.
Yeah, I do say to people, like, you know, honour your story, because that's your life experience. It's not a movie. It's not a book. Like, it's your lived experience, you know. And like from me listening to you today, I didn't know your sister personally, but I did hear a lot about her, and I can honestly say she would be so proud of you as a brother for fighting, and a family, for fighting for what you fighted for, because that's her legacy now, and everybody will forever now know of Jennies Law, you know. Yeah. So she's still here with us, and in a way.
Is like for us, you know, I and people are always saying she'd be so proud of you, but in some ways, we shouldn't have had to ever do that. No, we shouldn't have had to ever do that. Women in this country are being failed by the system that we have. Yeah. And what's really, really important is that women and men who are going through this need to stand up for what they believe in. Yeah. They need to be fighting, because if they don't, the people who are in those buildings, in government buildings, unless something hits their doorstep or happens to them firsthand, they don't get it. I can't sit here and honestly say to you today that I understand what a person that has gone through a domestic abusive relationship looks like. Yeah. I can't tell you. No. I can tell you Jennifer's story, but I know Jennifer's story from evidence and conversations and text messages and the voice of her children. But I never lived that. No. So I don't truly get it. So there's people going to be sitting listening to this podcast who don't truly get it. And there's people going to be listening to this podcast that go, oh my God, and they're going to have shivers because they have lived through that experience. And they're the people who can make the change. Yeah. They're the people that need to be in there and fighting for what's real, because I can't honestly sit here and say, I know what it's like to get a punch. I honestly can't say I know what it's like for someone to go through my phone and delete my friends. I can't honestly say that I can't go to work and not know who's going to be following me, or that my 2 children are sitting at home and I don't know whether when I go to bed tonight I'm ever going to see them again. I can't. Jennifer lived through torture, absolute torture, as has many other women and men out there. But the systems are not there in 2026 to support them. This piece of legislation is a starting point. Yeah. I am not going away by any means.
I'm coming with you.
This has, in some cases, Jennies Law has been something that has probably kept me on the straight and narrow for the last 4.5 years. Because it's given me a purpose to get up and go. Yeah. But in those 4.5 years of fighting for this, I have come across so many other issues within the same system, like bar and order, safety orders, protection orders. I still don't understand why a woman has to stand in front of a judge in Dolphin House for 4 or 5 hours when the guards in this country, the judge in this country knows now what they know, that they don't have 4 or 5 hours. Why you have to go in there and then be asked, where's your evidence? Yeah. Prove it.
And then they have to stand in front
of them. And then stand in front of them.
Perpetrator as well in
2026 can we not have that an emergency safety order or emergency protection order be issued from your local Garda station? Yeah. You can quickly walk into your local village, whether you're in Finglas, Ballymun, Kildare, Kilkenny, well, anywhere, that you can walk into your local Garda station, inform them of what's going on, and get an emergency safety order from them. Okay, it can't be your guard on the desk, but that the sergeant or the inspector would have the autonomy to be able to say, I need to keep this person safe for the next 20 days until we get a court date. And then anything happens in 20 days, that we can come out and we can remove the perpetrator from the home, arrest them and charge them with the offence of, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be breach of an order, whatever it may be. We don't have it. But also we don't have a system where when a guard arrives to your house and you don't have a safety order or protection order, they're saying, well, there's no order in place. And then you're relying on the individual guard to use their brain to say, well, let's remove them for a couple of hours. And like, there was a guard I came across, I think he was the superintendent, he's retired now. He was linked, our district was the K district, so there was Finglas, Cabra, Blanchardstown. The guard investigation was been working out of Cabra and Finglas. But he was the superintendent of Blanchardstown. I remember meeting him in court one of the days, I think it could have been the day actually of sentencing. And we were walking down the stairs and he said, I tell my guards, remove them. I'll take the slap on the wrist, but remove them. Give the woman time to process what's happened, to get a statement together to bring in so that we can do something about it. Now, if we just had common sense in every Garda station in the country, we'd be on a flying start. But we have a situation where the guards are bound by law. And in this case, there's no law. And the guard is not going to put their job on the line, rightly so, to protect somebody, because they're going to lose their jobs. So we need the government, we need the Department of Justice to sit down and now look at the next stages. And when I said I'm not going away, that would be my intention, that I will sit with them and go through the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. So the Jennies law is a toolkit, but there's many more toolkits that need to be developed, and there's a lot more legislation that needs to be tightened up on.
I've emailed Jim O'Callaghan about one and I never heard anything back.
Yeah, and see, that's what I'm talking about. And I know people are very busy.
Emailed about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And nobody got back to me, because there is a lot of cracks in the water. And do you know what? Even with in-camera rules, like you were saying about victims and survivors talking out, your silence left, right and centre. You have to go around every loophole to have conversations, which is very wrong. So even at that, like they cannot speak. They can't.
And your silence because you're being told, and this was in our case as well, we were told loose lips sink ships. And I'm like, that's great and that's all fine and well, but how long is this going to take? Because you're traumatized, you want to tell your story so you're saving other people or protecting other people, but in the meantime you're being told, well, you're going to jeopardize your own situation. And we haven't got a court system that's fit for purpose. That cases take so long in the courts, and then you go through them and it might be told, oh, you're only up for a hearing today, or there might be a conviction and somebody appeals and you're waiting another year. Like, we're seeing people's cases, even people who have been found guilty of murder, now appealing those convictions. It's wasting courts' time. And then other cases are not being heard. And then people are still living on their nerves because they're waiting for it to happen. Like, there's a massive amount of work, but I also believe that, I don't know how the Department of Justice move around this, because it's a job for the court systems, but I don't understand why our judges are not trained in domestic violence. To see the amount of suspended sentences coming from domestic violence cases, sometimes with particular judges, sometimes just the judges in the system themselves, that unless they really start to take it seriously, there's no point the guards doing their job.
And it's a separate court, that's the problem. It's the criminal court and then the family court, and it's...
And this was something I had with Helen McEntee, Lauren, because at the way the systems work is, if you have a conviction in family law court, or there's a case in family law court, criminal law doesn't have access to the family law proceedings, and that is being changed. And Helen McEntee did say that it would be changed, and it is part of their strategy that it will happen. It is something that I again will be vocal about, because we have seen both sides of it, and we're seeing both sides of it currently, as well. So like we do tend to push that, and again, people's support will be fantastic on it, because I think it's numbers is what's really important.
Yeah.
And people say that if it doesn't affect you, then don't get involved. But you don't know what's coming down the line.
Exactly.
Nobody knows what's coming down the line. And we're seeing the increase in domestic violence. But also what's really alarming is the amount of situations where I've had, just as a person, people contact me, and when you initially get the call or you initially get the text or the messenger app or the Instagram account, you assume they're talking about themselves, and then you realise they're talking about their 16 or 15-year-old daughter. And you're going, are you for real? That this is happening far younger now. And then you're listening to in a school situation, maybe where the lads think it's okay to follow their girlfriend on Snapchat and know where they are and let me know when you're home.
Yeah. See, this is why I say to like my generation now to educate their children as much as they can. That's why I create this podcast, not only for victims to watch, but for other people to actually educate themselves so that we can educate the next generation to come, because that's the way we can stop it, is by bringing up children differently and changing cycles.
Yeah. Education is a massive piece, 100%. I, again, as part of that initial document that went in, Norma Foley was the education minister at the time, and I got to speak with her, and we had a conversation about how important education is. As someone who works in education, I see it firsthand. I see the conversations, the comments, how women are talked about, how girls are talked about, but it's becoming far common and normalised. And there was meant to be a plan, and there was meant to be an educational piece coming down the line. Again, I would have assumed when Helen McEntee moved from justice into education, she would have done something in there, but she was moved on very quickly, and we have a new minister. But my plan is to sit and speak with the Minister for Education in the next couple of weeks, as soon as Jenny's law is passed, because I think when it's
one
passed,
thing at a time for you.
I think when it's passed, it'll be important that young children and young girls are aware that this is now here, and lads need to be aware, particularly lads. I know it's not always men, but 90% of them is, that now there's a piece of legislation that's going to put you on a register. And that register is going to impact your life. That someone else is going to be able to Google you and search you and find out about you. So I think there's a massive piece in education to be done there, but also a piece in education around, I suppose, the do's and the don'ts of what is a healthy relationship, because that's what's really, really important.
And how to, like, I try and talk to people about tune into your body, like, because your body tells you everything. Like, your mind sometimes can play a bit tricks on you, and especially with coercion and all these different things involved, your brain doesn't really think straight. But if you tune into your body, like, I'm really in tune, like, tune in, you can sense everything. Like you said about Gavin, like, you knew something in you knew. If you listen to that instinct, that is so strong and powerful. So if we teach people how to, like, speak up, you know, even young, like, I teach my little boy to talk the truth as much as he can. Because if you give someone's voice to them, you'd be surprised what words can do.
Yeah, 100%. You know? And I think it's really, really important as well that within the educational sphere of it all is that we find not only we need to know what a healthy relationship is, but we also need to know as we grow up, if it's an unhealthy relationship, what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree.
And the amount of people who have contacted me like, oh, can you come in and speak to the girls in my school, or come into the youth club and talk, and that's all fine and well. But what we need to have is a solid programme 100%. Where they're getting the same consistent message.
Like part of like English, Irish, maths, it needs to be a part of the curriculum, I think, 100%.
Like we have SBHE as a programme, we have Wellbeing as a programme in secondary schools, but also with the piece of legislation that Jim O'Callaghan has also planned to bring in, where if the guards have come out to a domestic violence offence, that they would inform the school of the domestic violence offence of what has taken place, so that the school can support the young people in the school. And that's absolutely fabulous. But what programmes are in the school to support them? And then what happens when happens to one child, and you realise that one child then says it in class, and before you know, there's 5 or 6 kids that have living the same experience? Because sometimes it's like everything, what's normalized in your house, you just think is going on in everybody else's house.
Yeah.
And it's only when it's brought to light that this isn't normal
Yeah.
and this isn't right and this behavior isn't right, that then we realize, you know, that there's something has to change. And we see, like, at the moment, if a situation like that occurs in a school system, you know, it's reported to Tulsa. What do they do, you know, at this moment in time? They have nowhere to put them. They have nowhere to put. They can't. There's
They
nowhere to
don't.
put the kids that they have in care.
Yeah.
So when you have a situation where they have to remove somebody for an emergency situation, they have nowhere to put them.
Nope.
So it's going back into trying to solve a family situation very quickly.
Yeah.
To try and, you know, look after everybody. So that system isn't working either. So
No,
again,
it has to be
there's a
changed.
bigger picture, and there's a lot of work to be done. But I do think in the last couple of years we have made a massive difference.
Yeah.
The fact that people are talking about it.
Exactly.
We are seeing more cases in the courts. We are seeing more convictions, and we are seeing more people reporting.
Yeah.
Now, whether they're reporting because domestic violence is on the rise, or whether they're reporting because domestic violence has been talked about and they know it's okay to say it now, I'm not too sure
Yeah.
of the outcome there. And I think we're a bit away from finding out what that will look
Yeah.
like. Is it that we're just talking about it more and people feel, well, it's okay to say what's going on and I can report it and feel supported? Or is there a domestic violence on the rise? And if it is on the rise, the only way to do it is start them when they're young and educate them when they're young. There's no point in me saying to you now, well, we're going to hold a big meeting for anybody 25 to 55.
No.
They've had the experience,
Far
they've
too
lived through.
far.
It's far too long in the tooth now for them. We need to start it on the ground, 4th, 5th, 6th class, doing something in primary school with them around, you know, where they do sex education in 6th class, do a program in 6th class with them.
Yeah.
Then do a program again in 2nd year or in 3rd year, a transition year program.
But
You
even
know,
younger, because they're like with Jennifer's children, like they would have had a lot of trauma, like, you know, and had they have felt like they could speak out in school, you know, and it been reported that way, you know, God only knows what
yeah.
was
And in
support.
Jennifer's case, you know, it was spoken about in school
Was it?
and it was
Wow.
reported to the
Wow,
school.
I did not know that.
And the school did do everything they did. And Tulsa, I have a letter at home dated the 16th of April 2021 where the case was closed and no further investigation was warranted. 24 hours later, Jennifer was dead. It was signed by a student social worker. So the systems failed Jennifer. The systems are failing so many people.
Yeah.
And all that would have been was that somebody picked up the phone and said, Jennifer, you know, is what the kids said true? Of course, if you're sitting in the room with a person that's doing this to you, you're going to say no. And I'm not blaming anybody. No. What I'm saying is that maybe if the social workers in that case had come out and spoke to the kids in school, they would have given them more information.
Yeah.
Or and it's trial and error. We're seeing it now. I can tell you hand on heart that I've seen situations where the social workers have come out to schools and spoken to the students in the schools. So in that case, it was unique potentially, or something was missed or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it caused a life.
It did.
You know, it caused a life, and we can't sit back and look at what could have happened.
Enough.
It's no point blaming the finger or pointing the finger at anybody.
It's a group
because
effort,
it's not
I say,
going
though.
to because it's not going to make a difference.
We all need to do something about this because, again, like in Jennifer's case, they're 2 young children now that have to grow up without their mammy.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not good enough, and we do need to try as best we can, like to change things. You know, however we can change things.
And that's what's important, Lauren, for us, is that no matter what we do, or no matter how much we give out or how much I say she was failed, it's never going to bring her back.
No,
She's gone.
she's gone.
But what we can do is we can change those things that made errors in Jennifer's case so that other people don't have to go
Save
through what we're
someone
going through.
else's life.
And that is the only thing that we can do, is that we can talk about Jennifer's story and all of those other stories out there that they've died at the hands of violence against their partners or ex-partners or men in general, and learn from their experiences to make sure we don't make those mistakes again. And this, as I said, Jenny's Law will be that toolkit that if I go into a relationship with somebody and I feel like something's not happening or something's not right, or I get a smack on a Friday night and on Saturday morning I'm in bought roses and flowers, then now I can go on to court.ie and go, is this normal? Has he done this before? There's a couple of questions, and I might just say
Go ahead.
a lot of times, and even journalists yesterday
Yeah.
ringing me, asking me, this person's ex-boyfriend is getting out of prison next week and wants to know will he be on Jenny's law. Jennifer's law will be when it's enacted. So we've the Justice Committee in 2 weeks' time, where I will go in front of the Justice Committee and I'm sure grilled as to the purpose of the law, what the benefits of the law is. They then write a report. When the report is wrote, it's brought back to the Department of Justice. If there's any amendments that they want to make based on the organisations that have fed into it, that's when that happens. Then it goes through the houses, so it goes through the Dáil, through the Seanad, back to the Dáil. Then it's acted into law, it's signed off by the President. Until that happens, only then can the court systems kick in and put somebody on. So if somebody is in court next week, they will not go on Jenny's law until it's acted as an actual piece of legislation. The same with the questions I'm asked in relation to, this person's in prison, when he comes out, can he be put onto the law? No. It can only happen when the person is being convicted of the offence. You can't re-convict somebody for something that they've already done time for.
Yes.
And I would wish,
mean.
for me, I would love Gavin Murphy to be coming out of prison and going on to Jenny's law. It would be only bittersweet. But unfortunately, he has been given his conviction. His conviction happened before the law was brought out. You can't backdate a piece of legislation. I can't say to somebody, right, you've done 5 years for assault, and when you come out now, I'm going to put you onto this register.
I understand what you mean.
Because the court will only be able to do it when they're sitting with that judge. So if I'm being convicted in court on Monday and the law is in, I can be given maybe a suspended sentence, but I'd appear on the register. Or I'd be given a 3-year sentencing, and when my 3 years is up, I'll go on the register for another 3 years.
Yes.
So it has to happen in court. So we can't backdate convictions.
Yeah.
And it's just because I know you'll probably get loads of questions about it now.
Yeah.
But I come off, you'll be getting, can this happen, blah, blah, blah. So it's easier probably just to say, it has to happen when the law is implemented.
Yeah,
and at the moment, we have got through probably the 3 biggest hurdles with the law being implemented. The first is, first of all, to get buy-in from the Department of Justice, which is probably the biggest one. To try and tie down a minister to a chair for 5 minutes and listen to you is massive.
It's impossible.
I've had 26 meetings with the 4 different ministers of justice over the time. I felt at some points I lived in Dáil. I used to walk in and I'd be coming off the bus and you'd be running up to get in, and the ushers would be like, do you need to go to the toilet before you go in today? And I'm like, yes, please. So I nearly got like a face that everyone was walking down
Knew who
me.
you were.
Did I want that? Absolutely not. So that takes time.
Yeah.
The next process then was to actually get the Attorney General to approve that what we have in writing as a piece of law will be able to be held up in law. Yeah. That it wouldn't be able to be appealed, that the government couldn't be sued, all that kind of stuff. And that's the role of the Attorney General. So it got the approval of the Attorney General. Brilliant. When the Attorney General approves it, it goes to Cabinet. So that's where all of the ministers sit at their weekly meeting and they decide whether or not they should take this on. That is a massive step, because a lot of times you'll have ministers with different opinions that how it might even impact their department. How does that piece of legislation impact the Department of Justice? How does it impact the Department of Education? How does it impact the Department of Housing? Because if we're going to have all of these women potentially coming looking for refuge, we haven't built enough of them in the country, so where do we put them? Yeah. So it impacts them. So one piece of legislation that impacts one government department has a roll-on effect. So that can be challenging. We got approval of from the ministers. So now where it goes, I had to make a written submission then to the Department of Justice and the Oireachtas subcommittee in December. I'm in front of them in January. The report will be wrote from that, and then that goes back to the minister. Then he will process it through the houses. So it should, if all goes well, it should be April or May. Okay. If everything goes well, it could be quicker. Yeah. But sometimes other pieces, we were supposed to be in the Oireachtas committee before Christmas, but there was a piece of legislation that was not, I wouldn't say more important, but there was an existing piece of legislation with an amendment to it. It's easier to do it. So they put that in December. Forward, yeah. So again, they just have to iron out, I suppose, and make sure everything is working well. But that's where we're at. So hopefully by April or May, it will be in. And I just would love to see in writing the first person on it to know that this has worked. Do I want to see anybody on it? 100% no. Are we going to see people on it? 100% yes. But that piece, and for us, it will be a bittersweet moment for us as a family that now people are actually being able to have that toolkit to make them make an informed decision of their future with that person. Number two, for her children, that their mammy didn't die in vain, for them not to, they'll always have that's in my mammy's name, that my mammy died because she was murdered by an absolute thug, but other people are being saved in her memory.
Yeah.
And for us, we just hope that someday they never have to cross paths again, because he isn't going to be in prison forever. And that hopefully, you know, even while he was in prison, he was still getting charged with different offences. So, you know, it is only a matter of time, but it never ever finishes, because we're 5 years in, and we are now also having to start thinking about, well, when he applies for his first parole, you still have to go through that victim impact statement again. You still have to justify why he needs to stay in prison. And also the children will be asked to write that. Yeah, of him coming out even earlier.
But even like the fear for you walking around and being fearful of this person being out, like as a family member. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Like the impact, like you were saying, what were you saying the number was? 6,000?
Over 60,000 cases were reported to the guards last year.
60,000. And then if you think about all the families that are involved, like besides the victims, that's implemented.
And even if you think of it, and I know figures sometimes mean nothing, but when you put it into perspective of, you think of, we all give out how crime is in Ireland at the moment, and the guards are not able to, but if you just take over 50% of the call outs last year from the guards were domestic violence related. So that tells you more than half of the call outs. And when we see all of the other things that we see on social media, the videos that we see, the you know, the articles that we see, and we're saying, oh my God, look what's going on. So if you can just park that and think of more than 50% of their call outs were domestic violence, and not one of them will be in the public domain. So what we're seeing in the public domain is a small amount of the role of what the guards are dealing with call outs. That's a shocking statistic for domestic violence. And as I said, they're only the people who have taken and been brave to go to the next stage. And sometimes being brave takes a long time. You've let them out once, you've taken them back. You've brought them in again to your life, taken them back. And that can go on and out. And it's even more difficult when there's kids involved. Because the nurturing mother instinct in most women out there is that they want that family unit. But when the family unit is not working and it's not safe, you have to be safe, your children have to be safe. And unfortunately, in Ireland at this moment of time, we don't have anywhere to put these people. And that's what I've asked time and time and time again. Why, when we get a call out, and half the case are domestic violence related, why are we removing the women and the children from the home? Why aren't we removing the perpetrator? Why aren't we creating a law that the guards will have the power to just remove them? Take the woman at her word at that moment. And I know there's women out there who will try everything in their willpower to get a one up on their boyfriends or their husbands, and we have to deal with those cases as well. But they're a minority compared to the majority. So take it at face value. If you walk in and you see a distraught situation, it's action. And what's really important, and I was asked this question a couple of years ago by a journalist when the introduction to body cams were being started with the guards. And for me, I personally believe body cams are a massive support in a domestic violence case, because when you walk in as a guard, you turn your body cam on, you're picking up the dynamic of the situation you're coming into. And you can use that body cam as your evidence when you go to court. Well, when I arrived, this is what I was met with. Because in lots of cases, when you come, the woman is going to put everything down to, oh, it was my fault, or I did this, or I did that, or it was me that smashed the frame, or it was me that broke the cups. Because they don't want things to escalate. Because when the guards walk out of the room, it will escalate if they tell anything. So I think those kind of things are a massive support. But again, we need the guards, I suppose, to be able to be educated in domestic violence. I know they are, but a little bit more work needs to go into that. And again, as I said, we do need to ask the question, and I consistently ask it, why are we removing the women and the children? Why is it the woman that has to pack the overnight bag and go to a friend's house or a family member's house at night until he cools off? Well, maybe let him cool off in the cell and leave the children in their bed and leave the woman in some peace, that she can actually process what's happened, then send a guard who was trained in domestic violence back to the house the following day to get a statement and then take that process. And if the woman decides to stop and not press charges, then the guards continue with the charges.
Sure, I've even heard like I said, I've heard umpteen stories now since setting up the podcast. Like like a victim is like has to go to a police station to even make a statement. Like you can't even they can't even make one over the phone or anything like that. Like they have to go to a station, like, you know, and like especially for like some of these women again that I've spoken to, like they can't get to a station because they're being watched.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like how do they give a statement when they can't get there? Do you know?
And again, it's important because sometimes it can come down to the individual guard station, it can come down to the individual guard. Yeah, a domestic violence agency will meet you in a supermarket and walk around with a trolley as if they're doing the shopping and put in a safety plan, or they'll meet you somewhere.
Yeah.
So why can't the guards do the same?
Yeah.
Why can't the guards do the same? They have the powers, they have the resources. They are who we rely on.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to rely on them. And in fairness, I can't say in Jennifer's situation that I have anything but good news to say about the guards. They were amazing in Jennifer's case. They were amazing from start to finish. I've heard some really good stories from victims, but I've also heard stories where you're told, oh, well, if you make a report, you're going to be watching your back for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
They're not what you want to hear when you've taken that encouragement that you've probably bottled up for 6 or 7 or 8 months or 2 or 3 or 4 years to move to a Garda station to tell them what's going on in your life and to be told that that's just not good enough. And it's a minority.
Or there's a line that's not being crossed.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like I always say, and I've only learned recently, not everyone has empathy, and it's like, and you can't give that to someone either. But like, especially in services, like I feel like if you're going to work in a certain area, you have to have empathy. You know, you have to have that little feeling in your heart that goes, I can only imagine what this person is going through. Like,
and like I remember being at the launch, speaking at the launch of a women's aid report, and the minister was speaking, the Garda commissioner was speaking, and I remember asking, I spoke before him, and I asked him to answer the question. You know, when you go to a house call, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do when you go to a house call? Because if you leave after 5 minutes, you haven't dealt with the situation. And the response was, well, they might have 20 more other calls. Right. And we are training them, but they're not being trained in Tampa more to the level that they need to be trained at. And I have massive, I think, hope that the new Garda Commissioner, who has worked in the area of domestic violence, will be a little bit more clued in to what's needed. We have a massive team in the guards who are working on domestic violence.
Yeah.
I've met with some of them. I've spoken to some of them. Some of them are amazing at their jobs, but that has to filter down
all the way.
Because at the end of the day, they're not the ones who are going to be at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. No. They're not the ones who are going to be going out to that house call. No. So we need to have all of the guards
trained the
like-minded,
same way.
Thinking the same. But not even that. You touched on it there. Most people don't have empathy. Something you can't be given.
No.
You either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And for most guards, it's a job. So you put on the uniform, you take it off, and you do what you have to do in the middle of it all while you're wearing it.
Yeah.
So what we need a consistency. We need a law that's consistent, that they know step 1, step 2, step 3, what needs to happen, so that every single guard is doing the same, no matter whether the call out was 1 in the day or 1 in the morning to a domestic violence offence, that there's a process and that they follow it. Because it can't come down to, depending on the guard, depending on if they can get them on something else, they can remove them for the night. If you go in and there's a domestic violence offence being committed, or you're being told it has happened by a neighbour, by someone living above you, living below you, remove the person from the home, not the woman and the children, or the woman in this case. Remove the perpetrator. Yeah. Either do what needs to be done. If you can get them on a charge, get them on a charge. If you can't get them on a charge, remove them. Yeah. And if they come back that night, then you charge them. Because you've already told them to leave. So there has to be some mechanisms within the law to be able to change that. Yeah. And I do think that the new Garda Commissioner and the team will strengthen those laws. It is something that I would pray strongly, because it's needs to be changed. It does need to be changed.
I agree. You're absolutely sensational, Jason. Honestly, you should be so proud of yourself, honest to God. Before we finish up,
Yeah.
can I just ask, as a mother, how are her children?
They're doing okay. Yeah. They take each day as it comes, really. There's days where it can be quite challenging still. They have a lot of unanswered questions. They have dealt with a lot in their short lives. They would have witnessed a lot. And
The
I
trauma.
think the trauma is flourishes at different points of their lives. Like their communions, their confirmations, their first days of school. You know, she missed all of that in most of the cases. She didn't see any communions. She didn't see confirmations. She didn't see the young lads christening, because he was only christened afterwards because it was in COVID and she didn't get him christened or whatever. And so she didn't witness any of those things, and they had to do all of those things without her. And that has, that has impacted their lives hugely. But also all of the stories that they told the guards when that all happened, they have had to live through a lot of trauma. And it's really important that we as adults and teach them that what they witness isn't normal. No. That they can't go into a relationship, number one, and be that perpetrator, or number two, be that victim. And that's really, really hard, because they know firsthand what we're talking about. It isn't just, an education piece or someone sitting on top of a room and saying, this is the do's and don'ts. They have that real lived experience, and you can never be wiped out of memory. But what we really try to do is to ensure that we do what Jennifer would have done, and that we keep it consistent for them. We would, she was a person for a good to-do list. We found her to-do list for 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and there was lots of things on it, like, holidays for the kids, things that she wanted to do. So we've just made sure that we've lived out what she would have wanted. We try at Christmas to celebrate it, for Christmas now, like Jennifer would have always did the Christmas morning breakfast. And the year after she died, Christmas morning breakfast didn't happen. We just didn't do it. And then we brought it back, and we thought, well, you know what? This was what she did. Yeah. As well, sometimes the sausages looked like they were being cremated, but look, we'll get over that. But it was about bringing back things that she did. Yeah. In that short time that they would remember. Like, they'd remember us going to Jennifer's house to have breakfast. So now we go to my house and we have breakfast on Christmas morning. So it's the small things, and we try to talk about her as much as we can. It is still daunting sometimes, because like, I always remember the Saturday she died, the Sunday morning, going into the garage to get petrol, and me, myself and my brother went down to get petrol and milk, because like there was been about 15 gallons of milk had been used the day before. I was like, oh, we go down and get milk in the garage, so in case anybody comes to the house, be full. And just walking in, and the front page of every newspaper was her face. And we haven't really seen an end to that, because we've been fighting for a piece of legislation. So she's consistently in the media. She's consistently on the front of newspapers. It's consistently being talked about. And I think when it happens and the legislation is brought in, it'll be an opportunity then to, I'm not going to say park that piece of Jennifer's story, but that we can bring our kids into the the news agents, and not having to scour the newspaper before they go over to that area, or allowing them to be able to have an iPad or a phone without them wanting to Google their mummy's name. And they're the kind of things, like, her oldest child is 12, but she doesn't have a phone, because every chance she gets, she'll pick up somebody else's phone, and the first thing she'll Google is her mum's name. And yeah, some of the stories are, lovely stories, because it's about the legislation and the campaign, but there's also stories there about, him being in court and the amount of stab wounds that she had, and they're not things that they need to hear. YouTube, there's so many things. If you type her name into YouTube, there's stuff all over the place. And we're trying to protect them and allowing them to be children as much as we can. Very important. And I think that's really, really important. But they are getting on okay. They do go up, and like the eldest one would not like to visit the grave as much as the younger lad would, where he kind of ask, can he go up? Where they're dealing with it very differently.
Differently.
And we've gotten them all the supports that they need. They've been doing their counselling, their play therapy. But again, it could have been very, very different. And I think no matter sometimes when they're wrecking your head and you're looking at them going, oh my God, I'd rather you be wrecking my head, because the other side is that you could be also in a box with your mammy. So you have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
And when they're having their bad days, we've just had to learn how to deal with them. And coax them and have that conversation with them, but always from the very beginning. I think this was really, really important, that it was advice that we got when we went to Bernardo's very early on, as a family, to see how we could support the kids. And they said, don't ever tell them they're going to see their mummy again. Don't ever deny that their mummy is gone and that she's dead and you won't see her again. They need to know that they're not going to see her again. And it was that, and it was so hard to say it to them, and it was so hard to tell a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, your mummy's dead and you're never going to see her again. But they have understood it now.
Yeah.
And they know, as much as it hurts them and it kills them some days, and some days they have massive tantrums, and there's other days where they're like angels. They'll never forget her. We'll never let them forget her. And I do think that the legislation piece will be something that will be proud of.
Yeah.
As they get older, and hopefully that we don't see it needing to be overused.
Yeah.
I hope that in time the toolkit won't need to be as much, because we'll have done the education piece, and we're going to always see cases of it, but I would hope that the figures that we're seeing in the last 2 to 3 years, which are consistently increasing, will decrease, and that people will be safer. I think hopefully we'll see a reduction in murders in Ireland, because even just looking at the amount of deaths of domestic violence since Jennifer died, and before you didn't really relate to it.
No.
And now you know exactly what's going on, and it's every time you see something like that on the telly or the news, it just brings you straight back to that day, where before, I'm not saying you would just be like, oh, and you just click to the next station. Now it's real.
Yeah.
It's real, because you understand what has happened. You understand what that family are going through at that point. And you know the path that has to follow. And by God, it isn't an easy path. Like, when you're convicted of a murder and you're supposed to be the victims that are left behind, like, they have the person who has done that has access to everything. They access all of the statements that's given to the guards.
Yeah.
They have access to everything. They actually have access to your victim impact statement before it's read out in court. And if they wish for it to be withdrawn, they can ask for it to happen. Like, they, even after doing what they do, they still hold all of the cards. They are still in control. And that's something that, like, I just was so amazed by, because I was like, you're telling me that the victim impact statement that we write as a family, I have to give it to his legal team to let him see it in advance. I won't be changing it. So he can ask what he wants to be removed. It won't be getting removed. This is my day in court. This is my day of saying what we as a family have felt, and he's not going to take any of that out. But it's happening, and that's our court systems. That's our system.
Yeah.
So victims, even after the victim is dead and the family are the victims going through this court process, they're being treated as if now they are in the coercive controlled relationship, because he's still controlling, or she is still controlling the situation. So we do have a bit of work to do, but it's only if you let them.
Yeah.
And I think we need women to be strong, and to stand up for what they believe in, and to push, and don't let anybody get in their way, because they're not wrong. They're not, in any way to blame for what has happened. And I think that's the biggest thing with women. They blame themselves. Yeah. What have I done wrong? They haven't done anything wrong. The only thing done wrong was saying yes to him, really, And I just hope that whatever conversations we've had today, if somebody just takes one nugget from it, or one thing that they can recognise that's going on in somebody that they know, and that they reach out and they support them. They may not be ready to move on now. They may not be able to leave right now, but help them through that process. Be there for them. Be that listening ear. Be that call at the end of the night. Be that text message, I'm okay tonight, if that's what it is.
And Jason, can I just ask?
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm okay, yeah. I always get asked this question. I don't actually know, because I just
You're just fighting.
This is just a fight.
Yeah,
and
you're in survival mode.
It's 24/7.
Yeah.
Even when you're trying to do other things, it's consistently there.
Yeah.
You know, you're constantly thinking of it. You're constantly reliving the moment. No matter, I have no problem doing anything that anybody asks me to do, but it's that relived experience, that
Oh,
reliving that
the
moment,
trauma, you're
the
reliving it.
trauma
Yeah.
constantly, and that's what it has been for 4 years.
Mhm.
Am I looking forward to the legislation being in? 100%. Am I looking forward to, having a rest? No, because I'm sure there's so much else
That
that
you
needs
can.
to happen,
Mhm.
and I will continue to be the voice that's needed there. I would love to see more men
Mhm.
being activists
Yeah.
and supporting women.
Yeah.
And if it's in that WhatsApp group, call people out for it. If it's in that dressing room, call them out for it. Don't allow it to happen. If you're not comfortable with it, call it out. And what I've seen, and it's been really, really interesting, in the 4 years I've been going around the country talking at different events all the time. I actually commented, there was during the 16 days of activism just before Christmas, and I was asked to go over and speak at an event in Tala, with one of the libraries who were having an event over there, and it was so nice to see more men in the room.
Yeah.
Now, it was only 6 or 7, but it was more than I'd seen, where it was an event that you could just sign up to yourself. Obviously, when you're going to speak at other ones and there's rooms of people, they're all been there because they've been told to go by work. But I mean, for people to actually just actively go on
Go
to
themselves.
Eventbrite, buy a ticket, and go to an event to hear people
Yeah.
stories or to listen to how they can help, that was something that was really impressive, that I actually commented on the night, that there was more men in the room of something that they didn't have to be there for, that wasn't being asked to go for work or whatever. So I do think we've a bit of work to do, but I do think there's all that, I don't want to get involved because it's nothing to do with me, and or if I see something happen on the street, am I going to get involved and then something happens to me? And I 100%
Understand.
completely understand that. But unless men start standing up for women, you just ask yourself as a man, if that was your mother, that was your sister, or that was your daughter in the future, what would you do?
Yeah.
And if you would do something differently then instead of waiting until then, do it now.
Yeah.
Simple.
Well, I'm so grateful. You have left me speechless, to be honest. You are just sensational. And honestly, you've done Jenny so, so proud. Like, and I can't say that for her, but as a survivor, um, I could only hope that my family would be like yours.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing what you're doing. So be really proud of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone.